I'm not going to give a long history of who I am or anything. I definitely do not predate the VC6 era. I joined the team working on C++ about 3-4 years ago. But since that day, the concept and the name VC6 would come up a lot. And so as we set about working on this release and on this talk title, this name kind of resonated. This 10 is the new 6, without trying to steal it from the fashion industry. What did we really mean by this? So as I was joking around, we don't actually want to go back all the way and get everything back from the VC6 era and just bring it to today. That's really not what we mean by the title. It's simply that VC6 was an amazingly productive tool at the time in 1998. And we really recognize that now. And even though we've made all these advancements in a lot of areas, from the compiler to the libraries, the tool today just doesn't seem as productive as it was. And so our goal is really just to make VC10, the next release of Visual Studio, as productive as VC6 for native developers. There are caveats to this, right? Visual Studio is now a much larger application, and we recognize that people don't just do C++ development, although maybe in this crowd it's only C++. No? Yeah, that's right. And I know you saw a lot of announcements today about a lot of huge technologies, things that I barely actually understand myself. So hopefully today, this talk, even though it's the last of the day, will kind of bring it back to the basics and just good old native code and writing applications for Windows. I don't think my demo is going to connect to the internet or anything like that. So what exactly are we going to work on in this release? What have we really focused on? Because I've been working on the IDE components, and we've been working on VC10 since before we shipped VC9, Visual Studio 2008. So this has been like a couple of years worth of development already that we've been working on, and it's now finally getting close to fruition. And we've kind of focused on a number of areas. Like I said, I'm not going to have interesting web services here that I'm going to demo. It's really just improving the life of a native developer through libraries, through compiler improvements. And a lot of it is about getting the basics right. A lot of the work we've done is about reworking the architecture, about getting the IDE to actually scale to the size of code bases that people have today. Turns out, from 1998, VC6 to today, code bases have really grown into many, many millions of lines of code. And a lot of our features were not originally designed around that kind of scale. And so this is really something we've been working on, where it's not about, we haven't really brought new things to the table, but we really changed how we provide the basic services of the IDE and so on and so forth. And finally, extensibility. This has probably been talked about in a lot of other talks that you may have seen or will see over the course of the next couple of days. Visual Studio really, we want to be about extensibility. This may just be the buzzword of the industry these days, but I think as when we look at large ISVs where people use native code, you have build systems and you have all these kinds of things that you want to extend. You don't just have one size fits all, and so we really want to make the tools that we ship easier for you to upgrade and change and you make your own. So there's a lot of things to talk about. I kind of split it up into the big three: libraries, language, compiler, and the IDE. And so I'm kind of just going to run through this all for 20, 30 minutes through a demo. And then we'll touch on a few more points afterwards. So I'm using the actual VPC that we've given to everyone, which means I didn't take the latest build. So I may still come across bugs that I don't expect. But hopefully everything will go well. So where am I starting? I'm starting with a simple WordPad application. In fact, we've been shipping, I guess, a WordPad sample MFC application that resembles this one out of Windows. So here we go. If I launch it, there we go. This is what you get, right? You're familiar with this. This was state of the art in 95, 96. It was a pretty awesome application. I could load files. So let's see. Where'd I go? There we go. There's my WordPad. There's a Ulysses. I came across, free text there. And I could count something about it. I've got some stats function here in my menu. OK. Told you. Oh, there we go. Only 1,700 words. It's only counting a subset. We'll look at that later. So there we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is how this is an MFC application. This is what we've helped you build very easily with our frameworks for the past many years. MFC's, I don't know, as old as me, I guess. So what we wanted to do, though, is you already have MFC applications. So we want to get those apps and help you make them look somewhat more modern and make use of the features of the latest operating systems. And now we have a talk on the last day of PDC where you can learn a lot more depth about this stuff. So I'm just going to give you a taste of the kinds of things we're talking about here. So that application, I think it really should have the Office look and feel. So of course, I'm cheating here. I just have an if-def. It's just going to work magically. But it really doesn't take much to make this upgrade for an app that already has all its functionality. The main point is that you have to change your frame to derive from FrameWind EX, very Windows-ish change. And then you simply create a ribbon. And it's pretty straightforward, right? I've got this member variable of type C MFC ribbon. And then you can initialize it. And you can take a look at the initialization code. It's really just create a panel, add open, save, et cetera. And then you'll see that the same commands are going to be routed. It's actually going to do the exact same thing as the other application. Just look a little bit better. So there you go. I didn't change the logic of the app whatsoever. All I did was give it colorful tabs, the ability to switch styles. And there we go, black. And of course, a ribbon with all the features you'd expect out of the Office ribbon. You can add, if you had all your own commands here, you could add them to the quick toolbar. You can remove them. It'll remember your state. And this is all handled for you underneath in the MFC framework. We've actually doubled the size of MFC, more or less, in terms of UI components. Now, of course, we did this for those of you who pay very close attention. This actually shipped already in Visual Studio 2008 SP1. But I felt like I wanted to, if you haven't been paying too close of attention to what we were doing at MFC, this is still kind of a core part of our strategy. And in VS 10, we're going to continue and add features relating to Vista and Windows 7 as well. So like I said, there's a great talk to go see on the last day. So I still have my feature here. So OK, we've upgraded the look and feel very quickly. And so now, what about deployment? I find myself at work even with a couple of machines, and I want to not do a full setup. I just want to copy the bits over and try it out on someone else's box or even on one of my other boxes. Now, OK, you can copy these files, but why not have the build system enable you to do this? Why not add, we compile, we link, we do all these other things. Why not just do something more? Why not just add a deploy step? And so with our new build system, which you may have noticed from the output here, we actually transitioned to a new build system based on MS Build. And what I'm going to do, yeah, we're finally on one build system at the company. You can now trust that all code that comes out of, all languages and tools come out of DevDiv work with MS Build, which is nice. You can integrate across all your different programs. But what I wanted to show you here was the ability to extend it. And it's actually very impressive. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close the solution for a second and open up in, let's go to the folder where I have it. And I'm going to show you, I have in there 3 little XML files. Of course, I said there'd be no internet stuff, but there's definitely XML. And what does that look like? This is just these 3 files in very succinct terms define a tool that deploys my program and the associated libraries that I need to run the program. So if I were to look at this XML, it would look like this. Where basically, You could write this in C# if you wanted to, but we allow you to do it in XML, truly declaratively. And it looks kind of crazy, but all I'm doing really is copying the C runtime and your application. Okay? I'm not going to go into like the gritty details here. There's a lot. There's a lot to learn here, and I'm still a novice at it as well. So the interesting thing is, to add this to our project, we've got our new project format, which is very similar, but based on MS Build now. And I'm going to open that one as well in Notepad, just so you can see what's going on under the covers. And of course, maybe because I don't trust Visual Studio right now. But really what I'm doing, I could do this in Visual Studio, actually. It wouldn't be a problem. So I'm just going to add a new target. We have our default CPP targets. These are, think of those as all the ones we ship out of the box. Compiler, linker, manifests, all that stuff. But you can just add your own. So ours is called deploy with libraries. Very interesting name. There we go. And I'm going to add that. And I just have to add the targets themselves. So one of them is the settings, and one of them is the targets. There's a lot of lingo in MS Build for those who have played around with it. And here again, it would be the same thing with the targets file. There we go. So I've modified my project, and let's just reopen it. Now, the interesting thing is that not only does this add to the build process, so now I have this extra step, which is to deploy, it actually appears in my project properties, and I can modify the variables. So I can say I want to enable or not enable, and it really feels just like part of the overall build system and project system in VS. So here I'm going to put it in the Z, this is my VPC shared folder here, and I'm going to enable deployment. It's already set correctly. And here we go, and I'm just going to build. So yeah, this is an interesting output here. You didn't see this in the old days. There's a lot of diagnostics abilities in MS Build. You can actually set it up from right here while we wait for it to build. That has not changed in this release, just so you know. Compiler will not go 3, 5, 4 times as fast. That's a pipe dream. Get over it. Well, it's over a VPC. Bear with me here. So you can update kind of like from nothing to crazy over like expressive diagnostics, where even I would have trouble finding what just happened. So there we go. It built, and if I go look at that folder, we should have it there. My deployment folder. There we go. So it copied it there. And let's just switch out of this VPC to another one that is fresh, untainted by Visual Studio. There we go. Win2k3, very, very blank. And if I have it here, there we go. There's my WordPad. So it deployed. Let's double click. Oh, no. How many people know this dialog? Oh, no. In VC6, you never saw this, right? Yeah. This is a little sin we made, I guess, in the past couple of releases. We introduced this in Visual Studio 2005 and perpetrated it in 2008 in that we've made it a little bit more complicated to deploy applications correctly. And now we did this to help you because it made things easier to service. The best intentions, come on. Well, after trying and trying, we realized this was not the right way to go. And those that are astute here have noticed that this whole time, I've been deploying with these 9.0 DLLs. That's the previous version. That's Visual Studio 2008. In VS 10, we have solved this problem. And let me prove that to you just for purpose here, you want to trust me at least. So let's check out a new feature, possibly my favorite so far in the product. There are ones that I'm working on that are not yet visible, is right here. You can target previous versions of the tool set. So we can just say version 10, which is the current version, instead of version 9, which is just 2008. Or you could do version 8. We're going to ship with those 3, I think, out of the box. At least version 9 for sure. And you could try version 6, but we're not going to help you there. But I mean, it's really just, this is all XML based. This is just defining a platform and a tool set, a set of CL and link for different platforms, and that's it. It just appears here, and then you can just use it. So there we go, apply, and I'll rebuild. And now you'll see it's using the 10.0 compiler right there. So it's not, there's no tricks in terms of our compiler. A new one will understand the old ways of doing things. It's really just using the old compiler. And so if you set up, how many of you probably put your, I'm willing to bet it's a good bunch. How many of you put your tools, like the compiler, up in source control as part of your build? OK, I guess that's us. So we like to do that. All right, well, see, this is why we need to have these interactions, so I can find out the myths that we live in. Right. I should have known that. I have a marketing friend over there. She should have told me. OK, well, the idea is, though, that you could have your own you could even have your own platform, perhaps PlayStation 3 or one of these kinds of things, and just create it and have it available as a target, which is kind of neat. So we rebuilt. Let's get out of the VPC again and go back to my Win2K3 box. Here we go. Now we have it built against 10.0, and it works. App local deployment, that makes sense. So yeah, there's not a big brouhaha here. There's not much visual to this feature. But at least we're getting rid of the problem that we kind of created over the past 2 releases. Right here, I just copied 10.0, these 3 files. We can look at the build output from MS Build. And if you look, in here. And if we looked at our output, it would show you that it ran that task. I don't know if you guys can read this in here. Right there. So the deploy target copied my executable and then the 3 10.0 DLLs. If I were to rebuild now, it wouldn't need to copy the 10.0 DLLs because they're already there. You get to take advantage of the built system's implicit knowledge of output and input. Is that what you're asking? OK. Oh, it's still there. It's still there. Just we don't use it for the C runtime. So the question there was, do we still have the Win side-by-side directory? That's a Windows feature. We don't affect that. And it's very useful for Windows. So if I were to go into this Windows, this would look the same as it always has. In fact, there we go. Where'd it go? And not much in here. This is the built-in Windows stuff. Oh, if you install Visual Studio, the C runtime will be there. So we still put it in here as part of, if this is how you want to do it. But we actually don't put it in the Win side-by-side directory. We actually now follow the more traditional model of the CRT 10.0 would be in the System32 directory. Let's not derail the talk too much right now. We can still service it. We can still service it. It's still our DLL to service. We don't have as many subtle policy rules, but you can still, I believe, add some of those to your application if you absolutely want to. Like, we still have manifests that allow you to clarify what version you want. But we will service it through System32. So anyway, those are great questions. And I'm sure there'll be plenty more as I finish. OK, so we deployed, and it worked. So now that I'm using 10.0, I should probably get to use some cool features from the new compiler. So let's take a look at that. So remember I had this, my little stats function here that could count stuff. So I'm just going to jump into the code for that function. It's nothing too fancy. It's over here. There we go. So here it is. I'm counting, and I'm just tokenizing all the words in the document and then counting a very odd set of words, the ones that are longer than 5 letters and that contain this pattern. So it's elegant. You would, if I had not written this comment, you probably would have read it for a couple seconds and still figured it out. But, if you were using anything but C++, you would really not write this way. You'd probably want to use some kind of regular expression. Am I right? No? You like writing your own iteration logic? OK, all right, OK. So yet again, we've fixed that. We added, well, not we, but the C++ standard has approved a regular expression library. So now we can make this a regular expression search. So it's actually pretty easy. There's my regular expression R. And what is it? We're going to say I'm searching for all the words that have, is that right? Yeah, you're right. Shall I get? Well, this is already tokenized. So you're right. I could just go c.starm, and that would be fine. There we go. That would be sufficient. And then I've got we just have to keep the results in something. So that's called, very intuitively, WS match. And then, well, in this iteration, instead of doing all this manual finding, let's get rid of all that and just add an AND clause to here. Right? And it will be regex match. Actually, sorry, forgot to use the right namespace. You must have been running where IntelliSense was. There's my mouse. So what am I matching against? I'm matching against star I, and I'm putting it into results. See, we parsed the template madness very nicely. We're going to make this look better, but at least you can tell that our IntelliSense engine really gets it. This is actually really complicated code to figure out. If I remember correctly, when I first tried to play with regular expressions in the last version of Visual Studio, that was one place where I was managing to get IntelliSense to fall down. So, and then our regular expression. So there we go. And now all I do is increment the count. So we've made this a little bit simpler. I think you would agree. But we can do better. In C++ OX, so the next standard of C++, that is called OX because it's supposed to finish in this decade. And guess what? It's not. So it's going to be a hexadecimal. It's going to be C++ OA or OB. They just wanted to stick with it. They didn't want to switch to C++ 1x. It just, apparently, they're stubborn that way. Now, they have already approved some very cool features. One of them is taking the keyword auto that has existed in C++ for quite some time, that has been kind of useless because it's implied, and using it for another purpose, which is automatic type inference. For example, when I'm writing this loop over here, this line right there, by the way, can everybody read this? Because I can make it a little bit larger if you'd like. Is that? Is that better? Nice new feature of our editor in VS10. Mouse wheel zooming. Can't live without it anymore. So there's really no reason for you to have to figure this out. And I'm sure you've had to type this many a time, right? Map of string, comma string, colon, colon, const iterator equals map.begin. The compiler can and should figure this out for you, and now it can. So there you go. In VS10, you can just write auto. Your iteration loops will look a lot nicer. And it still is just as clear. I think this is one of those places where using type inference, which some people might say hides the meaning, is not actually the case here. Now, that's not bad. We've made it clearer. But I think there's another thing here. Whoop, sorry. There's one more thing here that I would say we could improve upon, which is the fact that we're iterating ourselves. I mean, why should we iterate? We're applying essentially a sort of predicate on a whole bunch of elements in this vector. I shouldn't have to figure out how to go through it myself. Now, you've all typed this this line. Everyone's done this once, right? So it's not like you're learning it. However, come on now. How many have never done this? How many are true just C coders? OK. I'll see if I can. We don't have much new in the C space this year. But I have a colleague in the audience who is on the committee for C, just for C, and maybe he can get something in there for anyone who wants something. Okay, well, there are actually algorithms in STL for many years now that allow you to get rid of your own iteration logic. For each, for example, is one of these, where you just say, come on now. Okay, well, you know, it's a demo. No, I have the using namespace STD. I guarantee you that. It's right there. You know what? Let's make sure I didn't make, in the meantime, some kind of compilation mistake. I don't believe I have. All right. Well, I don't need it. Real devs don't need IntelliSense, right? Actually, I work on IntelliSense. So don't. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Don't go after me for the deployment story or the fusion stuff. Just ask me about IntelliSense. So in this case, all I'm doing is ccwords.begin, and then ccwords.end. And then comes the question of what am I applying in this for each loop. And the STL requires you to pass a functor. How many people know what a functor is and have written a functor? This is written? You've all written a functor? Okay, very good. Okay, apparently this is, I'm preaching to the choir. I actually think that writing a functor that would allow you to count the number of words that are more than 5 characters and match this regular expression just would probably not scale in your code. I think if you were to code review this, you'd be kind of confused as to why you're adding another function into your namespace, even if it's called my helpers, and you have the 5 one and the 6 one and the 7 one and the 8 one. So the biggest feature, arguably, that we're shipping from the next standard of C++, because it's already been approved as well, is lambda expressions. And lambda expressions, and I'll go into them in more detail in slides later on, they allow us to do something like this. And it's going to look pretty obscure, so just bear with me here for a second. I'm embedding the functionality that you would put in that functor right here in place in the for each function call. And all I got to do is copy paste this right here. In fact, it's not exactly that. I'm copy pasting just the end statement, because all we're doing is figuring out which one is right. And this would be I. There we go. There we go. And let's get rid of that. Stop coming up. And there we go. Now we are counting without iterating and without writing our own string parsing that you would usually just do with a regular expression. Let's make sure I didn't make a mistake. And let's run that. And let's see how many words in Ulysses actually match that pattern. There's quite a few, I hope. Maybe 17 something? Oh, come on. Who said 0? All right. And the reason is I didn't increment count. Thank you. All right. Settle down. There we go. Who knows what I was thinking of when I was doing this? Yeah, there you go. Again, preaching to the choir, apparently. All right, let's do this again. Oh, hold on. What did I miss? Yep. Okay, this time there should be 1,700 something, right? Unless my original code was not good, which is possible. I'm clearly not a good developer. Program manager, that's why I did it. Failed the programming test. 28, okay. Not 1,700. Apparently my counting code, really weak. But I trust the regular expression. It can't be wrong. This is what it says. I'll check with Ulysses. It's about, what, a couple hundred pages? I'm sure we could go through it and verify. And And of course, yes, for those that have already used the STL like significantly using the algorithms and functional stuff, you could replace this with even removing the count intermediate variable, and then you get super efficiency. You get no intermediate variable, you get no iteration logic, and you get your lambda expression to just fit it right in there. The reason I stayed with for each, though, even though countif kind of felt right, is there is one thing that is not in the standard that is very related to the STL that we are shipping in this release ourselves, which is our parallel programming library for native developers. There might have been a lot of talk over the past kind of couple years in research of things that we've been doing with .NET, experimenting with APIs for doing parallel programming. And then we looked at the STL and we saw this perfectly good algorithm-oriented API that we could just help you get in parallel. So let me just jump to my stdfx file, and let's add the one header that I had not added. Now, since I work on IntelliSense, I will brag about one thing. It's hard to show off with IntelliSense, but one of the big fundamental changes we made in this release is that when I make this change, we used to reparse your entire solution, right? If you modified your header files, specifically one like this, like stdfx, we would go and recompute the meaning of everything, perhaps in the universe. And now, this NCB file that used to do that, we've gotten rid of that part of the architecture. And now we simply compile the relevant IntelliSense information for the file you're working in. And so now I can do, using another namespace. I don't know why it's capitalized. I got to talk to those guys. And now we can really fix this really nicely into, that's it. And you'll, come on now. It's not working out for me, guys. This is not cool. But anyway, with one change, like you get to reuse all the algorithms you're familiar with, or if you're not familiar with them, now's a great opportunity to get familiar with them. And they're part of the STL, and we hope these parallel versions will be easy for you to adapt to and take advantage of the multi-core revolution, which is happening on the client, as well as on the server. So is it done? Now, what should be fun here is that there is a bug. Yep. And let's load up Ulysses again. This should be fun. Here we go. 28. OK, let's do it again. Is it going to go up, go down, stay the same? Oh, darn. OK. There is a bug here, even though apparently my machine is not racing fast enough to exhibit it. Well, oh, the VPC only has one. The computer has two, but the VPC has one. You're right. So at least you don't have to worry about race conditions on one core. We're not that sneaky. We probably should insert them there just to teach you. But anyway, really the count variable here is not protected for concurrency. We don't solve that problem in this API. But you just have to change this to be an interlocked increment, and the performance would go way down for 2 cores. But it would get awesome at like 8 or 12 or 24. Yeah, this is what you do when you get synthetic ideas and you put them in a demo using Ulysses. So anyway, I really just wanted to give a taste of all the different things that we've been working on in terms of this release across all the different areas. So it's not just about the libraries in VS 10. It's about simplifying deployment while perhaps affecting servicing. Updating MFC for the new UI from Office 12 that you can now use in VS, for your application. And it really doesn't require any change in application logic, which I think is pretty sweet, unless you've already moved on from MFC. But data that we have shows otherwise. And also, there's a lot of Windows 7 and Vista features that we are now more and more exposing through MFC. A simple one there is that I was popping up a message box, and already in Dev 10, in VS 10, we've wrapped the more modern Vista-style task dialog, which is just a much better message box. But it's just as easy to use from FC now. It's like one line, or if you want to do more, you can actually get a whole OO MFC-style API for it. And we're going to continue that. And there's plenty of information in a talk that you'll get, like I said, end of the week. Another thing is, VC6 is a bad example in terms of our commitment to the C++ standard. Visual Studio 2003 was a great release in terms of adhering to the standard, and we really want to continue that kind of commitment across the next releases of Visual Studio. And I think this one's pretty interesting because we will beat the standard. We will ship, I guarantee you, well, I can't promise, but we will ship probably before that spec is final. And we are basically putting in the things that have already been approved. And there's more than the two I showed, and I'll give a couple. I'll give you the list at the end. But we really want to help improve the productivity of the coding, as well as the tools that we provide. On the tools side, it wasn't necessarily visible from the IntelliSense perspective, and I'm going to get into it. But we've changed our build system, right, top to bottom. It's now much more extensible and pluggable. And of course, the editor, yeah, that's zooming. That was kind of cool. That's new IDE stuff. And finally, concurrency. We don't think native developers should be excluded from taking advantage of the hundreds and thousands of millions of cores that will be on your laptop. And therefore, we are creating APIs that fit the native developer, like fit the C++ model. Someone was more into C. Maybe we can make some that work better for C. We have OpenMP already, but we felt that the STL algorithms provided a great abstraction to create parallel algorithms. And that's just the beginning. We have plenty more there. And there is a talk to go see on parallel programming for C++, which was an hour ago, I believe. Look, I wrote the slide and then the schedule, this is what happens. Sorry? No time travel, but unless you guys can build that in C++. And of course, the last day is this great talk on building applications with MFC, which a colleague of mine is doing. And it's really going to delve into what we're doing in terms of exposing and enabling Vista and Win7 features. So that one has to be on the last day because we're going to show off, how we integrate with Win7. And it's big hush hush because that's tomorrow. So that's kind of the demo-oriented view of all these things. And I'm not going to go into details on every single feature. But for a couple of them, I wanted to go a little bit deeper because it's been a lot of our development time and efforts have been in some of these areas. Specifically the IDE. Yes, because I work on it. But just in general, when we shipped VS 2005, one of the things we really got as feedback was, we went and did all these IntelliSense features that lacked in a couple of areas, specifically scale and responsiveness. A lot of you are familiar with the NCB file, and I'm sure you have very positive feelings with regards to it. So deleting it, yeah, why? No, you should. I mean, once a day. It keeps the support calls at bay. So we really took a deep, careful look at our architecture, and this is one where there's been the most work done underneath the covers and the least visible at this point in the CTP. Hopefully a lot more to be seen in the next couple of months when we get to the first beta. I wanted to bring kind of latest bits, but my developers said no. They said, it's not ready, Boris. Okay. But we really have done a lot, and it really was about the fundamentals. I talked about in the first slide about nailing the basics. A lot of it was about scale issues. So we wanted to split apart in a way that to us makes a lot of sense, IntelliSense from symbol indexing, symbol browsing. First line there, NCB's gone. Yep. Yeah, we had a festival, we had a bonfire, it was great. Yeah. The constant updating IntelliSense is gone. We have different messages now. Just kidding. No, it's gone. And the reason it's gone is not that we don't update IntelliSense. Of course we do. But we've split apart the one, essentially probably the biggest flaw that existed in the NCB model that we had, which was IntelliSense was tied in its performance, in its scale, to the size of your solution. And that has changed now. That has completely changed. And now we are, to use a computer science speak, we are O1 with regards to the solution size. So you could have 100,000 files in your solution if you want. Please don't. Maybe 10,000. 10,000. 10,000 is a lot. You can have 10,000 files in your solution, and IntelliSense will not try to keep up to date for all of them. It will just stay up to date for the files that you're working in. And that allows us not only to be faster and more responsive, but it actually allows us to be more accurate as well. O of 1, OK. I had a feeling this was going to happen. If I were to define two dimensions, the size of your file that you're working in and its includee graph versus the size of your solution in its total number of files, and we were to call the first one n and the second one k, we are O of 1 in terms of the second dimension. We are not O of 1 in terms of the first one. We are definitely O of n in terms of the size of your currently working file. Did that make sense to anyone? OK, cool. Sweet. We were really hesitating as to how to describe this. We've put a lot of sweat into making this reality. And so it's nice to hear that it makes intuitive sense to you. That's not to say that we don't have to index your solution. We still need to help you find your functions across all your files. There's no way we would not provide you with that functionality. So we have symbol indexing that scales to your 10,000 or 100,000 files. We have a different parsing mechanism to do it. It's textual. Essentially, we record things as you write them in your code. So if you were to write void foo tchar, we would index it as tchar, because that's probably what you meant. In addition, we can even index things across all of your conditions. So if you have a if0 section, we would index whatever's in there, because there could easily be stuff you want to search or browse to. And so our index is now based on SQL, SQL Compact, which is really cool. I'm not going to show you it, but it's not hard to figure it out. And it really scales. We are able to scale to millions of symbols in a way that we can guarantee you we could not in the past. There's a price we pay in that we have a larger disk footprint, but we have a much better memory footprint because we can control it now. It's a true database. And I think you're going to find this pretty appealing, because as your projects got bigger and bigger, Visual Studio, doing nothing at all, took more and more memory, right? This is no longer the case. We control our memory usage the way we should, as any database-oriented system should. And finally, that textual parser, it's incremental. That's the key point. Again, the NCB was our database before, and if you would change a file, we had to go and figure out the meaning of like half of your source code again. Now, you make a change to one file, we reparse that file, update the database. In fact, we're very fine-grained about what we update, and that's it. You don't pay the cost of figuring out the 10,000 files again. You only pay that cost really once. So another one that I like that we're really O1 on, and I think, you know what? I will go and do it. But it's going to be very invisible because this project's really small. But if I were to take a massive project, changing configurations, that used to be a very, very dangerous thing to do, right? Now, nothing. No reparsing, no recreating the NCB. The index is just there, up to date, no problem. IntelliSense reparses for the current file, but like I said, that scales pretty well for us. So yeah, it's not very demoable, right? We have this problem of like, it just kind of works. And that's really what I want to convey. So you just have to take my word for it. So that's the IDE. We've been working on what I call, these are what we call the design time components, this IntelliSense and browsing and navigation infrastructure. And now that we've gotten a lot of these fundamentals right, and we've spent a lot of time just getting kind of back up to speed, this will enable us to now build a lot of cool features both in this release and in the releases going forward. The kinds of things that you really want in terms of code understanding and navigation. We realize there that there's a lot of productivity features, not about VC6 here. This is just about modern IDEs, right? Providing great, tools to understand your source code and navigate it. And we really do intend to move forward on those. Now, of course, the IDE is not just made up of my components. That last slide, I went into detail because it's my stuff. We also have the project system. Like I illustrated that with the build extension, but it's really very deep. We have the multi-targeting that is extensible multi-targeting to some degree. Right? You can create your own tool sets and your own platforms. You can write a platform. This used to be, it was what I would probably consider somewhat rocket science. You'd have to reverse engineer our DLLs to write your custom platforms. Now, it's just an XML file. You can define, I don't know, Linux or whatever as a custom platform. And it's MS Build based, which is great when in terms of integrating across all the languages and all the tools in the Microsoft ecosystem. This is the build system we use internally. So we really make sure that it can scale and it extends to all the needs that we have for it. And finally, the editor. Now, there's a couple of talks, I think, on MEF at PDC this year. And this is a very advanced, I guess, would be the right way to say it, extensibility mechanism, which we use for both the project system and the editor. So now it'll be very easy to write extensions to the editor that allow you to do whatever it is that you want to do. It's very open. So if you wanted to write extensions that highlighted all the words that, that matched your query, or like the one that you're hovering on, we actually have that as a sample. It's like 1 page of really, really succinct code. And so the editor is really opening up its guts to you to extend. And that's something that we're going to probably see the benefits over time. Microsoft Extensibility Framework is what MEF stands for. My apology. It's managed. The editor is WPF based. Yep. So we're all about native developers, but the tool does take advantage of the kind of cool capabilities, I would say, of WPF. So you can do, to be cheesy, one of the developers on our team, he kind of like has, as his background to the code, he has like an image that changes based on certain parameters that's going on as he's coding. As his background, instead of a white, just, or color, it's an actual image that's dynamic. Now, I'm not saying that's what you want to do. I go to his office and I don't like it, but it's to illustrate, like you can really do cool transformations on the source code as it appears, and you don't have to do your own parsing or classification to do that. Our classifications of the source code will be exposed as part of the editor. So if you wanted to see all the keywords, we tag those in the editor, and you can see that it's exposed in a way that we never did before. So that's the IDE. And then there's the standard. These are the two areas I wanted to go a little bit more in depth, because the standard is actually huge. The next C++ standard is, like there's a reason why it's taken time. It's actually really, really big. And the committee is working through a lot of the details still. Now, in this release, we've already got, in the CTP, you can play with the 4 features listed up there, which are Lambda expressions, R-value references, which are essentially a way to bind a function to an R value, which is compiler speak for something that you can move around, and then auto, which is automatic type inference, and static assert, which what we like to call a poor man's concepts, which allow you to, at compile time, how many of you do metaprogramming? Cool. So for those who do, this is really nice. You could do, at compile time, write an assert that says, this template parameter must be a unsigned type. And so no matter what, how you instantiate it, it'll guarantee that as the first thing. And the compiler figures it out at compile time. And then TR1. TR1 is the library that goes with C++ OX, and we've already shipped it. So you're good. There's a couple of small parts of it that we have yet to ship, which we think are kind of niche still, but we'll eventually get there. And then there's a bunch coming. And I'm not divulging them now. I mean, I'm not going to, they're all described in documents that you can read online. This is all, there's nothing secret about this. But they're still being worked on. And we are still working on which ones we're going to be able to get into the release. The really interesting one here, of course, is concepts, which promise to radically change the way you use templates forever. It will make, apparently, algorithms, actually not apparently, I've seen it. It does look pretty nice. It'll make algorithms in the STL a lot easier to diagnose. And you won't have 20 pages of template errors. You'll have something that resembles something that you could understand. So I do want to go into lambdas a little bit, because I think it's kind of the most significant feature that you can play with in the release. And it had a bit of an odd syntax that I'd like to demystify. So this is the definition for anyone who didn't know what a lambda expression is. It's simply a functor done for you automatically. It's pure syntactic sugar over a functor. But it's very useful syntactic sugar. So here's what it looks like. I'm incrementing sum for x being, a even number. So the different parts of this are this one, which is probably the oddest one that's here. This is what we call the capture block of the Lambda. Now, the capture block, in C++, we're all about explicit use of things, right? Explicit declaration of how you're using things. So when you create a Lambda expression, you are capturing aspects of the current state of the program and then packaging them into a variable and moving them around. So what we do here is, by default, we don't package anything. We don't take any of the surrounding state with you in the Lambda. You have to choose explicitly to take them in. And what we're doing here is we're saying, I want to capture some by reference. In other words, when I increment it inside this Lambda, which could be in a completely different place because I could pass f as a parameter, I will be incrementing the same variable that you see here. You could also capture it by copy, which would be the same thing without the ampersand. And then you would be copying it. You'd be having your own sum, and then you'd just be incrementing your own, and no one would notice. And then, of course, you can remove the sum and just put the ampersand, which just means take everything. Take the whole environment that I'm in and capture it by reference. If you want to be lazy and just say, hey, I trust that this is not going to do anything weird. This is your parameter list. This should be the most intuitive part. This is what it expects, so an integer. And this is the return type. So it's on the right side as opposed to the left side because that's the only way that it would fit in this expression. Actually, this is kind of cool. You're going to start seeing this pattern in C++ OX for a couple of other things as well. If you're curious, decal type is another feature that's coming in the next standard that makes extensive use of this pattern to declare your return type or your actual type. So this is saying we return bool. The reason you have to say it, actually in this case you don't. The compiler can figure it out on its own. But for complicated expressions that are, have multiple returns, you actually have to tell the compiler what it is that you're returning. In this specific example, I could have removed it and it would have been fine. And then finally, capturing it in an automatic variable. This is actually one of those places where auto, I said, auto just does, the compiler just figures out what it is and stores it. The interesting thing about a Lambda is that what is the type of this?
It's in X to bool.
Right. In terms of computer science, it's int to bool, which is great. And that's can you write that in C++ on the left side? Would you be able to figure out what to put there? It's actually not expressible in any way. You can wrap it in a tr1 function, but actually there's overhead to that. So auto is the way to go. Let the compiler just figure it out. And then you can call it f of 1, f of 2, and pass it. It's just a value at that point. So these are Lambda expressions. And they're in the CTP. You can play with them. And where I think they're really interesting to experience is when you're doing parallel programming, where parallel APIs really take advantage of the fact that you can quickly express functionality and state in one place and then pass it around on any number of cores. And so all those APIs that you see, and we have many more that if you went back in time and went to that talk, you would be able to find out about. Actually, I can tell you a bit about some of them, but it's built by a separate team. We have all sorts of things like agents and tasks and these algorithms. But the building block for all of these is Lambdas. So probably you're going to start seeing this as a kind of a required knowledge to build parallel applications in C++ anyway, and probably in other languages as well. So get used to it. It's kind of cool. So there we go. I think I kind of covered the gamut. I was trying to do it with a demo, not try to illustrate that we are shipping these things. And we improve in VS10, in my opinion, on kind of all of the areas that you care about as a native developer. The libraries in MFC have more than doubled from the past, from the ones we shipped 3 years ago. And we're adding more and more Windows 7 and Vista features. So you will no longer kind of be stuck with an MFC application that can't seem to keep up with the look and feel of the rest of Microsoft ecosystem. Or, well, the stuff we ship anyway. Because I guess the ribbon's still, it's picking up steam. Turns out Windows 7 is using it, so that's cool. And finally, the language. We are keeping abreast of the language changes. We are shipping them to you now ahead of the standard because they've already been approved. And we think that there's lots of ways in which you can make use of these. Make your code more concise, more efficient, and ultimately, hopefully, more readable and more usable as a day-to-day developer. And then the IDE, my bread and butter. We really want it to scale. We think that in this release, the tool will just work for solutions the size that you really want. I've seen customers over the past couple of years split up their solutions just so that they could fit in VS. Anyone done this? 2, 3 people? Yeah. We really don't want you to do that anymore. We really think that the scale that we can handle in the next release will be such that you can put the source code the way you want it, and we will just work. Our database will handle it, and you'll be able to index, really, really fast across all that source code. And IntelliSense, like I said, is dissociated from that metric. So that's kind of what VS 10 is all about. And I have a lot of additional slides here, but the key thing is that there are 4 talks you can go to that relate to this. I'll take questions in just a second. The two that are really C++ oriented are the parallel programming one, as well as the one about MFC. And finally, extensibility is big in the IDE nowadays, and we have 2 on how to extend the environment. And this would apply to the editor and the project system and everything else in Visual Studio going forward. OK. So that's my email. But then I think I have a Q&A slide. There we go. So I'll take questions. Yes? So the question there is, what are we doing in terms of improving the native code analysis functionality that we ship? So I think you're referring to /analyze that we ship in the previous version of the product. I don't know yet what additional new rules we are going to ship in the next release. We are definitely working on it, but I'd say that I don't know the specific plans that are probably in flux there. It's a sister team, and I haven't yet seen what new rules they're going to have. But the feature will still be there. I mean, it's obviously we're not deprecating it anytime soon. Yeah. In the early product plans for Visual Studio 10, I mean, refactoring is our holy grail. We want to get refactoring. That is practically what I was hired for. And in this release, we won't have refactoring, but we think the building blocks to get refactoring are there. Correct. It's been a lot of work to essentially change our architecture and get the functionality of VS essentially back. Oh, sorry. The question was whether refactoring is. Are we getting refactoring in the next version of Visual Studio for C++? And like I said, we really want to, but just not in this release. Sorry, over there.
2 questions. Did Microsoft make you get rid of the beard?
Hey, Tommy. They did not make me get rid of the beard, but I was going through customs, and I felt like it would be smart to not have a beard at the time. Yeah.
Actually, my question, so are you using MS Build to build tri-core PowerPC for the Xbox? Are they using MS Build?
They shall be. They will be. In fact, moving to MS Build makes it a lot easier for them. They have to do really hard things. The question was whether the Xbox team and all the other teams that we have that use our tool set use MS Build now. And I won't tell you the details, but it's a lot of work up until now for the Xbox team to modify and add their own platforms and all their own tool sets to our build system, and while still being the C++ IDE that everyone knows. So this will actually be a lot easier for them. We've actually made their life easier. So yes, they will be. Yeah. Is the deployment project useful to delivering software to customers? I'd say the deployment project for native code is useful in that, I mean, we recommend always going through a setup process to install your application, specifically for all of the C++ redistributables. So we still see that as the right way to go for a native app. At the end of the day, you probably roll additional things into your setup process, but we still see that as the way to deploy native applications. Yeah. There hasn't been some new technology that we're about to adopt or deprecate something else. Yeah.
Although this might be for the other talk. If for writing extensions,
Uh-huh.
every time there's been a new Visual Studio, it has pretty much broken, radically changed, so that you have to almost start from scratch.
Right.
So is this going to happen again?
Okay, that's a very good question. Since we're in a C++ crowd, it was about app compatibility. So I talked about this awesome new extensibility in Visual Studio, and the question was whether we're going to be breaking existing extensions. And I guess the answer is yes and no. In that, for example, the editor has undergone the most significant change. It's WPF based, but we've put a lot of effort to replicate the old interfaces just for tools to be able to migrate. Now, I'm not part of the core editor kernel team, but they've had informal kind of sessions with some of the major extenders of Visual Studio, and they're by and large super excited. And they're more than willing to make the change, because I think you'll find that the code will be like you have to do a lot less work to just plug into the editor. The rest of Visual Studio is not changing its extensibility model. I mean, we still have the DTE and all these things are still there. MEF, the Microsoft Extensibility Framework, will just be there as well. Yeah, we're not throwing it out. We still use it. Yeah, over there.
Will you be able to do visualizers?
Like STL, like the debugger visualizers?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so the question is whether we will still have visualizers in Visual Studio, and absolutely.
Will you be able to make custom visualizers?
Oh, are we improving the way to extend the visualizations? And the answer is no so far. It's a text file. You can just edit it. But yeah, we have not. We would like to improve that. So far, we just haven't had a chance. Yes. So have we improved performance of the STL in Tier 1 between Visual Studio 2008 and Visual Studio 10? Actually, yeah, in some cases we have. You're going to find that I talked about R-value references. There's a couple regressions. You're absolutely right if you're referring to specifics. But R-value references is a compiler feature that actually allows us to make a lot of our headers in the STL way more concise. I won't bore you, but there's a ton of places where we have to do every permutation of overloads for functions, and now we would just be able to make one, and because our value references will bind the right way. So yeah, we're looking forward to huge improvements in the STL performance through our value references. Yes.
Are you going to be associating library and include values with the project instead of with Visual Plus? So when I open up an old project that uses the O3 SDK, I don't have to go through and reset all my...
By the way, thanks for coming, everybody. Fill out evaluations. Yeah.
I don't have to reset all my includes and
right.
library files. Is that going to be put into the
project? I understand. So the question is whether we will put the things that you build with, your include the specification of what you build with, right? Your include paths, your library paths in the project file as opposed to your IDE IDE session, which would make it more portable. The truth is we actually do support that today and for the past few releases. It's just perhaps not the default way we have you approach it. You can actually set all of your include paths in a project. In fact, you can even do it with what we call property sheets. And all of this kind of functionality will continue to exist with MS Build. In fact, MS Build takes it almost a step further in that all the defaults are themselves in these XML files. So you could just, if you really want it to be portable and you want to be sure, you could just copy those over too. Although you could, I mean, hopefully they're on all your machines. So yeah, I mean, we totally support that. And we could discuss ways in which we could make it a better default or a better user interface to get to that functionality, but we support that totally. Yeah.
I know there's some talk on Blogosphere a while ago about actually exposing the abstract syntax tree from the IDE. And I want to say one of the Microsoft developers actually said it was something that's considered, but it was being put on hold for the time.
Correct.
Thought about that?
Most definitely one of my colleagues. So in the long run, I talked about refactoring as a place we want to get to. We do want to expose an object model over your code, help you really understand it, both in terms of huge navigation, but also the stuff that you could not possibly as a human see what's going on, right? Like how is the compiler really interpreting this? We won't have that in this release, but again, we've laid the groundwork to get there in the next version, or at some point in the future. We could never have done that in the past. That would have just been impossible. Yeah.
Do you plan to put in all these nice bells and whistles that the managed code people get?
So I alluded to that near the end, right? And I really wanted to have a build of our product from our current sources. We really set out in this release to build a ton of productivity, what we'd like to call productivity, small productivity features. Code snippets, squiggles for your code, right? These kinds of things that you really see in C# and all these other tools that make it a joy to code with. And we will have some set of those. Not as many as we had originally set out to do, because we really want to nail scale and performance and responsiveness, which has turned out to be a hard problem. But yes, absolutely. And I wish I could show you some. But yes, we will definitely have some of those by the beta. Promise. Yeah?
Will there be any differences in the feature set between like the professional and the express editions? Or are some of these features you talked about in one and not the other? I know that there are other differences.
I would say that for all the things I showed today, I don't know that any of them would be split in Express or not, except for MFC not being built into Express. Yeah. Yeah.
When do you plan to release this development demo?
Great question. When do we plan to release Visual Studio 10? Well, I don't have a date, but we ship usually every 18 to 24 months. So, and we already kind of call it in the demo there, 2010. So, I won't say more. Yeah.
Is there going to be are there any plans for memory and analyzers similar to the performance or visuals that track memory?
Oh, I see. So do we have plans to do more advanced memory analysis tools? The debugger and analysis group that we have is definitely working on a whole slew of analysis tools, both especially nowadays on concurrency. So you're going to see a lot more ways to analyze concurrency issues, whether how efficiently you're using your threads and things like this, memory contention. But at this point, I don't know of any tools that we're shipping that would allow you to visualize like leaks and whatnot in the next version. But I can follow up and find out if there are any teams working on that. There was a question there, yeah. No, you've been raising your hand for a while.
Is there any change in the connectivity to really well for the
No, there are no changes planned for how we deploy for Windows CE. They will also migrate to our new build system. So we'll be very unified across the board, and it should just work.
And also follow-up, violation and changes to CLI?
C++ CLI as a language is not changing. We continue to think it's the best way to do interop between native and managed code, unless you're doing COM, in which case there's COM interop. But we really want to focus it on that. So we are going to actually downplay in the next version kind of the other aspects of C++ CLI. We're not going to try to be a first-class .NET language. We're explicitly going to say, you're not going to get all the designers of .NET, all those kinds of things. We really think that C++ CLI is a great way to do interop to C# or VB or F# or whatever, and then there use them as like, for WPF, C# is just a better integrated tool. And that's the way we see ourselves. Yeah.
Follow up on his Windows CE question.
Yeah.
Are you going to continue to support older versions of Windows, building for older versions of Windows CE? Because one of the problems we've had in the past is that when Visual Studio moves forward, they lost support for older CE versions.
I see. I'd have to follow up. Whether we're going to... My phone. Let's put it away. All right. Whether we support... How we will support older versions of CE is well out of my hands, but I'll give you my business card and we can follow up. I thought there was a question here. Hold on. Yes?
How back in time do we go? Like, how many systems are supported in terms of
The multi-targeting, the native multi-targeting that I was talking about?
well, you went down to VS8, right?
So the feature is actually, in a way, very naive. It's an XML specification of what is your tool set, which you could define yourself. And we will ship out of the box with at least the 9.0 tool set described. So if you just type V9 and you have VS 2008 installed, it would just work. But you could describe whatever tool set you wanted. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The whole compiler. You could use GCC or whatever. Yeah. That would be magic, yes. No, but that's a good question. You're right, because at the end of the day, we could compile it down, I would imagine, but yeah, we didn't build the feature that way. Our compiler is not aware of older versions, right? To it, it's supposed to use this version of the runtime, and that's that. Name decoration, so on and so forth, right? Yeah?
I was wondering if C++ CLI will get the C++ OX language enhancements. Like, could you assign a lambda to a func delegate?
That's a good question. We should look into that. I haven't played that. I haven't tried that. So let's have a, we'll email each other afterwards, and I'll try it out. Or you could. Yeah?
Okay. My question is kind of with the multi-targeting, and you said you had a new project file.
Yes.
When I upgraded from VS 2005 to VS 2008, it changed the version number of my project file, and nothing else.
Right. Right. Yep. And in VS 10, once again, we will not allow you to kind of go back and forth between the two versions. However, MS Build as a project format, the XML format itself, is designed for backwards and forwards compatibility. So at least I can tell you that going forward after VS 10, you will always be able to open up your project in the previous version and not have to worry about that. Correct. Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. By the way, I think we're way over time, but so I'm really happy you guys are staying. This is cool. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. All right. Just want to make sure people don't, stay just to please me. You could build that. You could basically copy the file, figure it out, and change it. Yeah. The way we ship it, the way right now we ship it in the CTP, again, just go look at it. It assumes that you basically have VS 2008 installed and goes in those locations. Just, you could change that if you wanted to. No problem. Yeah? The solution format, the file that is the solution file, is it documented? I'd have to follow up with you. I don't know that it's documented. I know we're not changing it, so hopefully we can figure something out. Does it? Yeah. I don't know that. That's one level above us, right? But let's follow up. I'd be curious to figure that out. Yeah.
Well, actually, I developed in Visual Studio for a long time, and IntelliSense compiler always crashes.
Yes.
So, will you provide some like automated functionality to send dumps to Microsoft? Because you know that read 500 internal compiler error, you got rid of it, guys. So it's
right.
a great job.
Right.
But for productivity,
Thanks.
I really need IntelliSense.
I understand. So, we absolutely want to make IntelliSense better. That's been kind of the biggest thing that we've been working on as a team. And as I was preparing for this presentation in general, like, it was very frustrating not to be able to illustrate that to some degree. But it really is there. There's been a lot of fundamental improvements. One of the things, just to give you an example, when we moved from the NCV model to what we have today, is that we used to have very subtle failures or just inaccuracies based on headers being included in different ways. So some of you may have figured this out through like a lot of trial and error. But when we parsed files in the old model, they would be interpreted one way for your whole solution. Even though one project could be Unicode, one project could be ANSI, for example, and everything would have a different meaning. In your solution, one of them, whichever, total luck, like no logic to it, and that would be that. That is no longer the case in the product now. So the IntelliSense context is always built up on the fly for the file that you're editing, based on how it should be built. And we are internally seeing like a lot of scenarios where this helps. And we can't even count the ones where we don't know where it would help. Now, that doesn't talk about diagnosability and you being able to send us dumps. I have a colleague who would be more than interested in having a discussion with you. He's in the room if you're willing to stay and exchange emails on how we can improve our communication on this. Yeah?
Is this the release that's finally using the Phoenix technology for the X64 code generator?
That's a good question. We have not made a final decision on that, on whether the Phoenix is a research technology that we've been working on for a number of years that is about code analysis and all these kinds of things. And I guess the question is whether we're shipping it as our mainline compiler in the next release, and that's not something we've made a call on. So sorry. Yeah.
Is anything changing about parallel builds?
Parallel builds. Are we changing anything about parallel builds? No, but we have added. Since the last version, since 2008, we have parallel builds within a project, right, through the MP switch, which is really cool. Yeah. If you have a large project, you're going to get way more benefit from that. And then, now the last barrier is how to make link go faster. And we are thinking about it.
I'm specifically wondering about precompiled headers. We figured out a way to make it work, but it's kind of kludgy.
How to make precompiled headers work in the presence of parallel build.
Yes.
Okay, we should probably have an email and figure that out. Yes. Well, both of you. Fine, go ahead. Same time.
First question, are you still going to be able to develop applications for 2000 and up, or is it going to be only XP for this version?
So the tool, like Visual Studio, won't install, I think, on 2000. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that.
Salut, Eric.
I'm worried about the apps developed. I'm not worried about what the tool runs on.
I understand. So whether MFC and the C runtime will target Win2K, honestly, I think my gut feel is that it's probably a no, but I can't say that for sure. So we should just have a thread and follow up.
That would be a big compatibility issue, obviously. I mean, dropping 9x makes it almost impossible for certain apps to go past a certain level. If you drop 2000 support, it's going to
no, we haven't dropped 2000. I'm just trying to figure out what our plan is there. I can't say I know for sure. I don't think we've made a final call, so your feedback might be very useful. One of the reasons we usually do it as well is also that there's a lot of code that remains just because we still target those versions that we could really clean up the C runtime. Yeah. So go ahead, yeah.
A secondary question also, there seems to be an issue with, you talked about responsiveness of the product. And it seems to take a long time for the Visual Studio IDE to shut down for some reason. I don't know why. Exactly.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. I had this discussion with a lot of my colleagues just very recently as we were trying to iron out performance, like how we're going to test it and get it right. And solution shutdown is probably one of those where if you were designing Visual Studio, you'd probably say that's like a kind of a lower priority scenario to target in terms of performance testing, right? And that's what most people would say too, and I think that's what we used to say. And in my 3-4 years that I've been on the team, I have seen a ridiculous amount of email and bug reports about the solution shutdown being horribly slow. So I made sure that it's a very high priority scenario for this release. So I hope to deliver great improvements in solution shutdown time. The big thing to say there, though, is we're a large, at the end of the day, I mean, we're not shipping VC6. We're not shipping a standalone C++ tool. There are a lot of other things at play. So we will drive to make the VS shutdown solution slower, faster, shorter, smaller is what I meant. And I will push all the relevant teams to make it better. I will, hopefully our part in that will be a lot better. Yeah. Yeah. How about installation performance? Wow, talk about something I really don't control much. We recognize it as a huge problem. I don't really know what the status will be in the next release. This is way too early to know how our setup will feel in the next product. But I'll find some email of someone. I mean, I'll find you someone you can heckle to make sure it's better. Yeah.
Minimum system which you should run on XP.
Yeah, XP. Visual Studio will run on XP, absolutely. Yeah. And Vista and Win7, I'm sure, unless. Yeah.
Japanese files to allow 32-bit inline assembly to be built and rebuilding 64-bit.
So inline assembly, you're asking whether we will ever support inline assembly for 64-bit builds, which we don't today, nor have we in the past couple of releases. Our status quo hasn't changed there. There's a lot of people internally, specifically in the gaming industry, that really want us to change that. Hopefully I can pass your feedback along. For now, we think the MASM model is a good enough workaround. We want to make intrinsics performance just better. We'd rather focus on getting our intrinsics performance better. Yeah. I don't think we have a change in plan there yet. Yeah?
Will we get higher precision double-doubles?
Wow. I should probably just know the answer to that. Arjun?
What was the question?
Are we going to get higher precision double-doubles? And you better scream your answer.
Yeah, the answer is no.
The answer is no. Sorry, that's my colleague. I wanted to deflect the blame onto him. He has the power to fix it. No, never mind. Yeah. Yeah, so let me answer that question just right. If IntelliSense has problems, are we going to give you a patch to fix it, or are you just going to turn it off? So one of the things that's great from this perspective, if, let's say, we were to assume that we will fail at giving you good IntelliSense, which I hope will not be the case, is that we have dissociated the symbol indexing from IntelliSense. So you will still get a huge slew of features like class view and fast like symbol indexing and navigation like navbar. All these kinds of things are not tied to the correctness or success of IntelliSense, which is great. So if you're one of those developers that you can't get your code to be understood by the compiler, which is what parses for IntelliSense, which does require some work. I won't deny it. If you're passing odd preprocessor switches or just switches in general to your build that you don't tell the IDE, this will be hard for us to grok it from the IntelliSense perspective. Now, whether we will make it easy, we've already created tools, I guess, to make it off if you need to make it off without having to delete or rename anything. But our patching model is still the patching model we have in Visual Studio. I see. OK. So are we committing to fixing the functionality as opposed to rolling it into the next release? I would say yes. IntelliSense and what we call design time, like this kind of aspect, IDE productivity, is for this release is our #1 priority. But it's also the one where we've taken on the most dangerous amount of work. I mean, we've made some architectural changes, and there will be a tail, and we're going to work on it really hard to get performance and accuracy right. And I could easily say that if that's something we don't meet the goals that we really set out for ourselves, that we wouldn't wait a whole extra release to nail the fundamentals. We really do want to say that we've sacrificed in our timeline for this release. Like we're coming closer to the end now, right? We've already sacrificed some of the bells and whistles that we wanted to have that someone asked about to get the fundamentals right. If we fail on that, I really do hope we wouldn't wait for another release to get it right. But I mean, I'm not the VP either, so I probably can't commit to anything. Yeah.
I work on a pretty big project, and as soon as I start putting maybe 3 or 4 breakpoints, I start to see a huge slowdown in performance.
Is the performance issue when you launch the debugger with a lot of breakpoints? Is that when you get performance issues?
Is that the VC6 issue?
VC6 is super fast, but after VC6, all of the subsequent ones have a huge slowdown. And I remember I used to be able to put like 20 breakpoints.
Yeah.
And have no problem.
I do remember a regression in the time it took to bind breakpoints on launch. And the debugger team was aware of this, and I thought we had made improvements. I don't know what's the last version you've used?
2008.
2008? OK. Well, we should probably follow up. I have tons of cards for all the people that have already left. And we could follow up and figure out if we can make your specific scenario, if you can give us a repro and all those kinds of things to make sure that we nail it. Yeah. Yeah.
Any improvement on the unit testing framework for native code?
No. Sorry. We do see that long term as well. Something unit testing is something people really want nowadays. This is one of the unfortunate aspects of working in such a distributed fashion in so many teams at Microsoft, that the unit testing team has their priorities and we have our priorities. And we can't build unit testing all by ourselves. I mean, we do those 3 big things, right? Libraries and language and tools, but we can't do it all. And so it takes a certain amount of stars to align to get that functionality so I'd like it as well. I would tell you that in VS10, definitely not. Again, some emails so you can bug people would be good. Yeah?
Can you specify
Can you can you choose where to put it? In the CTP, no, but we have been actually discussing this like a couple weeks ago.
I assume that now that you're using SQL Server Compact, you're not using memory mapped I/O anymore.
Correct. We are not using memory mapped I/O anymore. We actually control the exact memory usage that we want. It's kind of cool.
You don't get the annoying delayed write fail when we're working overnight.
Right. We have different issues when it comes to the network, of course.
So you can specify the location so that file is not on the network.
Yeah, it's specifically that scenario. So SQL Server Compact is better in many ways in terms of file I/O than we were in the NCB. Bear in mind, the NCB, its original design really reaches back into like 1988, I think. But anyway, we really do think the network scenario or the flash drive scenario, all those kinds of things, will require us to give you a way to move the database to another location, especially since it can. We want it to grow to huge sizes. Right? We think you can have. We have simulated code bases internally, and as well as some internal ones that we've been playing with, and we're talking tens of thousands of files and millions of symbols. So yeah, we really want to let you put all your source code in the database. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I got a question. Are you still going to target Itanium, I assume, unfortunately?
Yes. We will still target Artanium.
Only with team system, I think?
Correct.
Why, if you don't know the answer, but why is it that you need team system to target Itanium?
Those kinds of decisions are definitely not the ones I make. I would say that there is a cost in terms of shipping a release, not in development, but in the massive amounts of testing we do near the end. And when we can reduce kind of the matrix in some dimension, it does actually improve our ability to ship for the core set of features in a much better way.
It seems like a strange, sorry.
Yeah.
It seems like a strange dependency. I don't know. I mean, just because you're targeting Itanium, you're kind of using each seed.
I understand. Like I said, those decisions are far beyond my purview.
Second question.
Yeah.
I hinted, or you mentioned the PDC slowdown problem.
Uh-huh.
The debugger slowdown problem.
Right.
I'm sure you know about that problem. It's been all over the news groups.
That on launch? No, I mean,
When you run the debugger, starting with XP and later,
Uh-huh.
the debugger will slow down to a crawl with some apps. It'll take 5 or 10 minutes to get these breaks done.
yeah, I've heard of this.
It's been all over the news groups for years, and I've never heard of any solutions. And it's
Okay.
probably by far the most serious Visual Studio 6 problem.
Okay. Well,
It started with Vista.
I can at least give you my card, and you can.
It started with XP. It did not happen in 2000, so
Oh, interesting.
it's an operating system.
Okay. Well, I know the right experts that can at least answer the question. Okay. Wow. Oh no, one more. All right, go ahead.
What about deployment of the runtime? Did you say that it's okay to copy the DLL?
So we have always supported app local deployment of the C runtime, not the debug C runtime, but the release C runtime. Before Visual Studio 2005, you would either copy it in System32 and have machine deployment, or you just put it next to your executable. In 2005 and 2008, we adopted the Fusion Windows side-by-side model, which you could still do an app local deployment, but it's really complicated and weird. And you got to write manifests, and you got to have manifests, and you got to copy them, and you got to make sure you get it right, and the error messages are impossible, and all that. So what we're doing is simply saying app local deployment works the way it used to, and that's that. Our policy on redistribution has not changed. So the different versions of the runtime all have, from a redistributability perspective, are all equivalent. I mean, they all have. You can install today, right, your application that you built with Visual Studio 2005, and you would have to redistribute that runtime, and we would support you there.
Yeah, but different versions of the 10.
There are no different versions of the 10.
Yeah, but no, there are.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So we are not going to, this is a very good point. We are not shipping Visual Studio 9 in Visual Studio 10. So by shipping the ability to target version 9, we are not extending in any way the support system for 9. Does that answer your question? So in other words, you have to have Visual Studio 2008 there you have to have installed it in some form to get that tool set and those libraries and then redistribute them, even though you're using Visual Studio 10. So this allows you to develop with the next IDE.
No, it doesn't ask you, like Visual Studio 2008 SP1
Yeah.
is a separate redistributable from 2008.
Right.
But they're the same file name, and you're not putting it in
Yes.
So how does that work?
Okay. So we should, okay, and we should just have that in email. Yeah, if you don't mind. Fair enough. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So this is the editor itself. And the idea there was we wanted to enable basically extensibility and, how should we say, UI customization and features that you could not get in the editor prior. Our experience with it is that if you think of us as an extension to the editor, right, the C++ language service like we call it, we are huge. We have years and years of accumulated expectations on how it's supposed to work from the old system. But we've had pretty decent migration, and no one would ever have a migration as hard as ours, I would imagine. And the features that we get with it are actually really sweet. I mean, I can write an extension to that editor in a way I could never have done that in the past. And so it does provide a lot of, it's not just eye candy, it's really just, it makes certain features trivial to implement when they used to be arcane. Performance is, I'm not going to lie, you're going to have the CTP, you can see it. Performance is not what you would want so far. But they're still in the milestone, they're still working on performance. So. Yeah, we own the scenarios, right, for C++. We own making the C++ experience fast, and we will make sure that it is. Yeah, totally. The WPF as itself is not slow per se, right? It's right. Okay, I'm rapidly going to say something that I shouldn't say at this point, so we're going to move on from this topic. Last question?
So, is the, not specifically C++ related, but are the other editors also following the same?
Yeah, so we have one editor in Visual Studio. There's one text editor, and it'll be super extensible for everybody. Okay, well, thank you.